we've been talking here about the Lincoln Project, and would love to hear your side of the Lincoln Project. Why is that needed?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different projects. There's the Republicans voting against Trump, RVAT. There's the Lincoln Project. There's Meidas Touch, MEIDAS Touch. And so these are all former Republicans. There's the 43 group, which is Bush 43. Those are all former officials from President Bush's administration. And so I would say that there's a coalition now of 4 or 5 special interest groups, if you will, or political action committees, what they call them in the United States. And so the Lincoln Project probably has the highest profile because they're the ones that are focused on the ads. Republicans against Trump are doing some ads, but they're more focused on grassroots activity and voter registration. And so I am sort of in the middle of those. I've given money to several of them. I've raised money for the Lincoln Project. I'm a donor to the Lincoln Project. But I'm also working with Miles Taylor, who you may see on CNN from time to time. He's the former chief of staff to General Kelly at the Department of Homeland Security. And so we're working on something that we're calling Repair 45. So there'll be announcements about that next week, who's on the board of that and what we're doing together. And I'm in the process of dislodging a few administration officials that will resign from the administration and speak out against what the administration is doing. And so why is it necessary? It's necessary because if you want to defeat Donald Trump in an age of disinformation, in an age of fragmented media, you're going to have to peel off 5 or 6% of the core traditional Republican Party support of Donald Trump. And so whatever I think of Steve Bannon, obviously I got fired for some of my off-color remarks related to Steve Bannon, but he is a smart guy. And so Steve said about a year ago, you got to be very careful because the coalition that got the president to the presidency is a fragile coalition. And remember, he only won the presidency by 110, 120,000 votes in a few swing states. And so if we can hive off 3 to 5% of the Republicans, to quote Steve Bannon, it's over. And so I'm working assiduously on that with these groups. And so I'm sort of loosely affiliated with all of those groups that I just mentioned. However, I am serving on the board of Repair 45, which is being led by Miles Taylor. Now, before you ask another question, one of the great ironies of what's happened is Donald Trump is actually bringing a very large swath of Americans together. That would be conservative Republicans like me and radical left-leaning people like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. He's bringing us together. He just happens to be bringing us together against him. And so this is one of the more fascinating silver linings and byproducts to Trumpism.
How large is this opposition within the Republican Party, given that it might scare President Trump if members of his own cabinet is resigning? But how powerful would you say that you are? Because rhetoric can also be, scary enough.
Yeah, well, I can only look. He's super mad at me. The orange maniac is super mad at me. It's gotten back to me in 3 or 4 different circles. Man, look out! If he wins, he's coming after you, and blah blah blah. I personally don't care. I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood and lived a good part of the American dream. I tried to help him win the presidency. Obviously, I only served for a short period of time in the White House, but I was on his campaign, worked on the transition, worked on the inaugural committee, was one of the executive chairmen of his transition committee. And the notion that he would subvert the institutions of our democracy and that somebody like him and William Barr would go in the direction that they're going in in this unbelievable experiment, this 244-year experiment, that he would be the orange wrecking ball to try to take down the checks and balances of that system, is repulsive to me. So I don't care that he's the president of the United States. I'm going at him about as hard as you can go at something, because if you can crack the vessel of Trumpism right now, it'll be easier. And I'm going to say something dramatic to you, and I'm going to, European history obviously better than me, but this feels like interwar Germany to me. It feels like it. And what happened in interwar Germany, there was lots of lies. As Goebbels said, there were big lies. There was demagoguery. And there was a large swath of people that were disaffected by the system. They didn't feel they were getting a fair shake from the system. They didn't feel like they had the right type of jobs. There was no economic aspiration. And so unfortunately, the same way, if you look at an organic chemistry table and you say, okay, a couple of these things working together over long periods of time will create life, i.e. that's why we're sitting here talking to each other, you do have some things on the periodic table that can create a rise of authoritarianism in a country like the United States. And so as much as I love my country, and I have lived a very good part of the American dream, and I don't think my life story could have happened in other countries. I grew up with uneducated parents. My dad was an hourly worker, and I went on to Tufts and Harvard Law School, built 2 successful hedge fund businesses. Even though it was only 11 days, I did serve in the White House. And listen, rightly or wrongly, as I said to Mr. Trump after I got fired, you don't have to worry about me. You've just made me as famous as Melania and Ivanka, and I didn't have to sleep with you or be your daughter. So I'm totally fine. I'm going to take the profile that I have, and I'm going to work towards bettering the system and making the system better. And so, what happens, you get disfigured in the political system. People tried to characterize me a certain way, and they tried to, rake me through the coals. But if you're in politics, it's like playing rugby or football. You got to expect a few head concussions, if you will. But that's fine. The profile that they've given me and the platform they've given me, I really do think that we can make a dent. We can significantly damage him. And if we can break the vessel of Trumpism. If we don't break the vessel of Trumpism, then you're moving into the 30s of interwar Germany. And this will be harder to break, and if you remember, Tim Bovary just wrote a brand new book on appeasement. He had gotten some of the secured documents from the German government. The book came out probably December or January, so 9 months ago now. And I would encourage everybody that's listening to read that book, because what did we learn? The German people, particularly the elites and the intellectuals in Germany, despised Hitler. The generals thought he was off his rocker, but he had a very large base of people that he was appealing to, and they were waiting for Neville Chamberlain to come and crack him. And then as a result of cracking him, he would tumble. And the conclusion of that book is that these demagogues are blown away at the bellicosity of their rhetoric and their bullying and how much they can actually get away with in a society. And so, of course, Neville Chamberlain didn't have the stomach for it. We know what happened. So we got to get him now before he wins again. And so we've got 47 days to do that. But I would argue that he has been one of the more destructive forces in the modern era of America. It would almost be as if Joe McCarthy and Charles Lindbergh had a baby, and the baby was raised by Roy Cohn and grew up to become the president of the United States. And so that's sort of what we're dealing with right now. And so we can defeat him, but we have to get to the people I grew up with. We've got to get to the blue collar people in the white ethnic areas of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. I'm probably less relatable to those people today because I've created some level of financial independence for myself, and I've built some, reasonably successful businesses. But maybe I'm not that unrelatable to them given the way I grew up and given the empathy that I have for them and for their struggle. Because one thing that Mr. Trump did, again, I don't want to demonize Mr. Trump, because in the process of demonizing him, you'll lose his ardent supporters. The minute you start to demonize, the flaps go down over their ears, the blindfolds go on their eyes. So I don't want to demonize him. And I want to point out to people that he did see something that's happened in America, a great phenomenon, which is, for whatever reason, establishment politicians have created a vacuum of advocacy for white, blue-collar Americans. And so if you look at, sorry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you also believed in his project being part of his team, I guess, at least to start with. Did you have any fun at all in Washington?
I had fun on the campaign. Did I have fun in Washington? Yeah, listen, I have fun, man. I'm having a great life. I mean, so I have fun even when I'm getting my ass kicked in life, and I got myself fired when my son sent me the 15-minute tape of the late night comedians in America making fun of me. I thought it was hysterical. And so I accepted the invitation to go on Bill Maher and Stephen Colbert. I don't take myself that serious. So yes, I did have fun. It is a sacred responsibility to serve the government, frankly. The great irony is we gave somebody that really only cares about himself the most important job in public service. And unfortunately, he sees that as ruling as opposed to service. So those are two very, very different words. But yeah, I had fun. I enjoyed the campaign. And I actually, through cognitive dissonance, I was more focused on the message of helping blue-collar people convert their economic anxiety and convert their economic desperation into economic aspiration. And because I grew up in a blue-collar family where my dad's wages in the post-World War II era were quite high. And so we were able to live in the middle class. That very same job that my father had back in the day, assuming that that job existed today, it's down probably 25 or 30% in real economic terms in terms of purchasing power. So to me, there's a huge dilemma in the society. If you lop off the head of Trumpism and Trump is defeated on November 3rd, we still have a systemic dilemma in the country. It's not like Trumpism is going to expiate itself because Mr. Trump is gone from the landscape. There are his acolytes. There are people like Tom Cotton. There are his children. There's a lot of people, Mike Pompeo. They think that this is the right strategy for America. It's sort of this white Christian nationalism, which is really a subversion of the original documents, if you really look at the documents. So we look, I mean, the good news is I believe, and I'm an optimist, I believe there are more of us rational people who have a respect for the rule of law, have a respect for the diffusion of power, recognize what the founders were trying to do, despite the original sin of slavery, which the United States is still trying to reconcile. It is a reckoning that is continuing to happen 150, 160 years since the abolition of slavery. We're still trying to reconcile what happened and what we can do to make the situation better for all groups of people. But listen, it's a great country, and you have to have a diffusion of power at the top. I'm sure you understand that in Norway. Most liberal democracies understand that. A diffuse power structure leads to more individual freedom and more liberty.
Mrs. Scaramucci, we have a few more minutes if you have.
No, I'm good. I have time. I'm sorry I got here late, but I have as much time as you need.
Thank you, sir. The Trump voters, and I'm opening up for questions here. I'm just posting, asking this one with the Trump voters. The rhetoric you hear from the White House now that an election can be rigged. Some are speculating he might not leave voluntarily. I mean, that's not an American way of doing things. But should we be scared, or would you say that it's dismissed as rhetoric only? and then please prepare.
No, I think you have to take that seriously. Mr. Trump doesn't have a sense of humor. You find him on the campaign, you know, some don't make jokes, but they're usually accidental. When he's talking about 10 or 12 more years, he means it. You could see a scenario where Mr. Trump is reelected president. Second or third year of that term, he kicks out Vice President Pence and he nominates Ivanka Trump to be the vice president, and then resigns from the presidency to allow her to be the incumbent president and the first woman president of the United States. That sounds like a House of Cards screenplay, but that is something that would have to be on the table for this family in terms of the way they think about things. They are not about accepting norms, and they are about breaking rules. So yes, I think there's a systemic threat and there's a systemic danger. He's also done something that no one else did, not even Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy. They've subverted the Justice Department. And so one has to wonder if the Justice Department is well placed in the executive branch, because he has his acolyte, William Barr, perverting justice in the United States and putting pressure on attorneys inside the Justice Department, which are now the Inspector General is investigating. So this is stuff, nasty stuff that, you know, when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't think was going to happen in my country. I was reading about it in other countries. I said, well, that's not going to happen here. There's enough checks and balances in the system. But remember, to really understand U.S. history, the Congress has abrogated a lot of their powers after the Vietnam War. And that abrogation of those powers has made the presidency powerful. And so you would need a responsible person in the presidency, one that has civic mindedness and civic virtue to protect the country. And now you have a guy in there that's malignant, that's trying to take more power.
Please.
So, Mr. Scaramucci, you met with a regional reporter back in 2017 with my colleague, and you said at that time that you loved Mr. President Trump. So why did it take so long for you to change your mind, and what was the decisive turning point for that?
Did you hear the question, sir?
I didn't. You'd have to repeat it. I'm sorry. I wasn't able to hear it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Why
You can just come over here if you that will be easier. We have these corona restrictions, you know, and there is social distancing and.
Well, see, if you're in Sweden, you can like kiss each other. It's no problem. Right? All right, so come on and let me hear the question. Yeah.
Still a couple of hours from here.
So you met with one of my colleagues back in 2017, and you said to him that at that time you loved Mr. President Trump. So why did it take so long? And that was after you were fired. But why did it take so long for you to change your mind? And what was the turning point? What was decisive for that?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. And remember, this is not a personal thing for me. I don't hate President Trump. And what I said that I love President Trump. I actually got along with President Trump. I just want to make that very clear. When you're asking me about whether I had fun or not, of course I had fun. And I had a 2-decade relationship with him. But there was a crossover point where he decided to take what he was doing in the presidency in a different direction. And so here's what happens to a lot of people, and here's what's happening to people that are in the administration that know that things are going very badly. You're there, you're like, okay, this doesn't sound right, but I need to be loyal to this man. Let me stay loyal to him. Okay, well, that doesn't sound right. Let me now do the cognitive dissonance and the moral equivocation to stay loyal to him. I don't want to look like one of those guys that's disloyal. So let's go over that. I'm fired from the White House. You can see me on record, on camera, on video, trying to be supportive of the president for 2 years. But he's separating women from the children at the border. I denounced that on CNN and other networks. He is disavowing the intelligence agencies of America in front of the Russian president in Helsinki. I disavowed that. I wrote an op-ed that the press is not the enemy of the people. You can go to hill.com. It was an April 2019 op-ed where I tried to explain that the First Amendment is sacred in our institutions of government, and it helps to check the people that are in power and hold them accountable. And so it's very important that we have a First Amendment. It also unleashes great economic innovation because we can teach our young children to speak freely. They go on and create Facebook and Google. In China, they suppress the internet and suppress the press. And of course, they have to steal our technology and our trademarks and intellectual property. So there I was trying to split the baby, if you will, stay loyal to the president, but he's continuing to do this sort of nonsense. And then you're asking me what the break point was for me. It was the squad. If you remember who the squad is, it's 4 congresswomen. They are on the left side of the agenda. I am a center-right person, and so I don't agree with the squad as it relates to ideas or policy, but the president is now using a racist, nativist trope, and he's telling them to go back to the countries that they originally came from. And so they're all dark-skinned women, frankly. 3 of them were born in the United States. 1 was naturalized as a citizen, and all 4 were democratically elected to our Congress. That was the last straw for me. They told my Italian grandmother to go back to the country she originally came from. That's American racism. That's American nativism. And so I spoke out against it. And so then Mr. Trump attacked me on Twitter, which he's wont to do. That's fine. I'm a New Yorker. I attacked him back. I think I called him Fidel Adolf Trump because I was trying to get the dictatorship in there with the fat shaming, right? Because the initials is FAT, you know. So I knew that would piss him off. And then he came back at me and attacked me again. So I fired a few more shots at him he didn't like. And then so what does Mr. Trump do? You can go back to August of last year. He started attacking my wife. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm an Italian American from New York. My wife is off limits. And so I'm going to punch Mr. Trump right through the ropes. Do I look like Ted Cruz to any of you Norwegians? I am not Ted Cruz. Okay, so you're going to go after my wife. You're going to end up with the Lincoln Project, Republicans voting against Trump. You're going to end up with me in social media, talking to you guys on Zoom, doing Anderson Cooper's show twice a month, Chris Cuomo's show, CNN New Day, MSNBC. When they let me on Fox, which once in a while they do, he goes crazy and tweets at me. And that's fine, you know, because I'm a big boy. I know how to handle it. But you're asking me what the break point was for me. As I told Mayor Giuliani, whoa, I'm not going to disavow my entire life story and my personal integrity to support this son of a bitch. We're not going to do that. And so Giuliani has decided to do that. We've been friends for 30 years, but I'm not doing it. Is that a good answer to your question? I mean, that's about as basic and as about as authentic as I can be. Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm with a Norwegian news agency, and my question is about Trump's personality, because he has this public persona, which is, you know, brash. He's very sure of himself, and he, you know, says things, you know, like climate change, for instance. He doesn't believe in it. He believes it will get hotter, and you know, many of his views have evolved over the years. He was kind of a Democrat before. How much of what he's saying do you think he actually believes, and how much is, you know, like political theater? What's your opinion?
Well, you know, I'll tell you two stories. One story is from May of 2016. He's spewing a lot of misinformation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He comes back onto the plane. I look at him. I say, what the hell was that all about? That was a lot of nonsense. He looks at me and laughs. He says, well, I only believe half of what I'm saying. I was on the Bill Maher show, the American comedian show on HBO. He called me after the show to critique me. This is when we were still friendly after I had been fired. And he said to me, well, is Bill Maher an act? I said, well, what do you mean, Mr. President? He said, well, he doesn't really hate me like that, right? That's just an act to help him get ratings. I said, well, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But let me ask you something about you, Mr. President. Are you an act? Well, of course I'm an act. I can't believe and I can't understand why other people haven't figured that out. And so you already knew the answer to your question before you asked it. He doesn't believe what he's saying. Most of that stuff is an act. But here's something that you should know about him, and you should find this very concerning. He is remarkably insecure. So insecure, it's actually startling. And you would say to yourself, how is that possible? He ascended to the American presidency. He grew up with wealth and privilege. He's had some business success despite the bankruptcies. How is he that insecure? But he is. And let me tell you how that manifests itself. It manifests itself with overcompensation and bluster. He's not capable of apologizing. He's not capable of admitting he is wrong. I can stand before you in the world and tell you that, I made a mistake in the White House that got me fired. I'm accountable for that mistake. I never blamed anybody for my firing. I can tell you, upon having 3.5 years of data on his presidency, that is an abject failure of a presidency. And if we were on a publicly traded board together and we had hired this person to be the CEO of our publicly traded company, we would have to say that we made a mistake and now we need to seek his removal. But Mr. Trump is not capable of making those admissions. So that's a morose sign of insecurity. Last point on this, I think it's very important. You reject science and you reject intellectuals because of your insecurity. When people walk into his field of vision that he feels can speak in complete sentences and are not intellectually vacuous, he's threatened. And so he has to undermine them in some way or somehow. And I'll tell you something startling about Mr. Trump. He is like a modern day Inca. He believes in personal human sacrifice. It just happens to be of the career kind. So what he'll do is he'll lift Rex Tillerson over his head. Rex is a super smart guy, very capable, well respected by political leaders around the world and business leaders. His family loves him. That's something that's not true for Mr. Trump. And he'll lift that guy over his head and throw him into the volcano of his personal self-hatred. He's tried to do that to Kelly. He tried to do that to Mattis. I tried to do it to McMaster. And this is how the guy operates. And so there's a tremendous, his undoing will be his self-loathing. There's a tremendous self-loathing to his personality.
Mrs. Scaramucci, thank you so much for being on, talking to us.
Good to be here. I'm sorry I got here late. If you guys need some help on making the decision to give him the Nobel Peace Prize, give me a call. Let me talk to some of those committee people. Okay, I'll straighten them out for you. All right.
I'll send you their email addresses.
So make sure you don't embarrass your country by giving that bozo the Nobel Peace Prize. All right. We've already embarrassed our country and by making him our president. So don't embarrass your country. Be well.
Thanks very much, sir. Bye now.